How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Okay. Happy Martin Luther King holiday to anybody who's listening or watching. By the time you see this, I know that it will already have passed. When I say Dr. King, what does that mean to you?
It means hope, dream, aspiration, equality, strength, wisdom, power, and I can go on and on.
Well, since you can go on and on and on and on and on and on, for me, from an early age, one time I was at the library on Martin Luther King Day. It wasn't Martin Luther King Day back then, but we were, as a community, celebrating him, and I went to the library, and the newspaper came by, and they were like, hey, and I was a little kid about age 12, and they were like, do you know who Dr. Martin Luther King was? And I said, of course. And they said, can you tell us a little bit about him? And then I began to discuss what my mother, grandmother, and others had told me, and they put it in the newspaper, and it was a great article.
Really?
Really?
That's
really.
awesome. That's
So,
awesome.
if I had to describe Dr. Martin Luther King in one word, I would say transformational.
All right.
Because I just don't look at him as a civil rights leader, but I also look at him as a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so that blessed me, just to look at what he went through, not just dealing with other races for blacks, but what he had to deal with from people who look just like him in the church. And that's still true today, that a lot of people in the midst of a lot of causes and movements, and even the proclaiming of the gospel, there's a lot of division and separation among the black community. But I thank God that today there seems to be a general peace when we say Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but in his existence, that didn't exist. And I always keep that in mind, because whenever you're making a difference, there's always going to be opposition. But if you do what God has you do, I always tell people, whatever you do in this world that's for Jesus,
That's right.
it will echo in eternity forever.
Absolutely.
And so, we've got to open this up with a song on Martin Luther King's holiday. Drum roll in.
Well, prior to the interview, with the topic that we're discussing today, this song rang in my heart it always resonated with me, coming up from Mount Calvary Baptist Church back in Port Arthur, Texas.
Mount Calvary. Mount Calvary.
Where Sister Gracie Watkins introduced me and opened me up to to be more vocal in my singing and more open to worship.
Is that how she did it?
Yes, she was either that or one of those. But ultimately, it was a song that she introduced me to, and it was a song by Erica Campbell and what are their names? Mary. And it always holds true, even during this time with Martin Luther King. It's never said there would be trials. Never said I wouldn't fall. Never said that everything would go the way I wanted to go. But when my back was against the wall and I seemed all hope was gone, I just lift my hands up to the sky and say, help me to be strong. I just can't give up now. I come too far from where I started from. Nobody told me that the road would be easy, and I don't believe he's brought me this far to leave me.
Does it seem like she felt that? Amen. Amen. Makes me want to get my sign in March.
Oh my God.
Okay.
Sean, so dramatic.
So, the topic today, motherhood. You being a mother, I myself being raised by a single mother, something that stood out to me in our conversations and just in me thinking about it by myself. The way that I looked at my mother, I've never had that discussion with a mother. So you have the viewpoint that you had and have when you raised your children and are raising them to a certain extent now, but they also have a viewpoint of you.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And so let's talk about it. So when I say motherhood, what comes to your mind?
It's always, motherhood is an overwhelming task. But I mean that in the most humble way that I could possibly think. It's overwhelming because it's overwhelming with love. It's overwhelming with joy when you see them accomplish something that you alone probably didn't show them. It's overwhelming with the things that they bring to you that they may be struggling with, and you're able to at least comfort them in that moment. So motherhood to me it's overwhelming, but in a good sense. In a good sense, especially when as a single mother, when you're having to do most of the things alone, to think for everyone, yourself, your kids, and the things that go on around you on a day-to-day basis. So sometimes you have to be a mother when you really don't want to be a mother. And I can definitely speak on that. But motherhood is overwhelming at sometimes, but it's a good overwhelming. I enjoy it. I enjoy it.
So from a child standpoint, my mother had me when she was 20. And so back to my earliest years, I would say the way that I viewed my mother, one, she was my best friend.
Aww.
And even though I saw her working, she did data processing. And so basically back in those days, she could get a job almost anywhere. And so I never heard her say it was overwhelming, but I could see at different times, meaning nights, she might come home tired, and in the midst of me going to school and her cooking and doing this, that, and the other, I could tell somewhat, I don't want to say overwhelmed, but I could tell she was tired. So from my perspective, I was like, man, my mama can do anything because she's doing all that and she's always going to make sure I'm taken care of. So where you, from a mother standpoint, saw the word overwhelming, but in a good way, I, from a child standpoint, would say I saw a tenacious woman, a woman who I considered like a superhero because she could talk to me about all kind of subjects, and because I was the only child, she would play games with me. And so that definitely inspired me because I'm super competitive. I always have been. And so when she played games with me, I just would see her as a superior me.
Exactly.
And so although she was a woman, there were just different things I wanted to emulate concerning her. And I still have to a certain extent. And so what else comes to your mind as far as a mother? Because as you relate to me, I'll just relate it from my perspective with my mom.
Okay. Growing up, of course, I was the oldest girl. My brother, I have an older brother, but it was 6 of us. So my mother was exactly the same. She worked hard. My mother worked hard for as long as I can remember. She always worked, and her work always consists of housekeeping in different or various nursing homes. That was her thing. She loved doing that. And to see her come home and emulate some of the things that she would see on a day-to-day basis would have us sometimes cracking up laughing at some of the things that she would see some of the older people doing when she would come home. That was fun for us, for her to share those moments with us. So practically, we were with our granny most of the time because my mother worked. And so we would stay with granny. Once we got older, we were able to stay alone. But me being the oldest girl in the home, I kind of looked after my younger siblings when my mother worked. But to see her work and be tenacious about whatever she did, that was her thing, to work. But she was a cook too. So I see a lot of that I got from her.
You can cook?
Yes, definitely.
Definitely. She can't cook. Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
So a lot of that I picked up from my mother, honestly. My granny would show us different little things in the kitchen, but it was a lot of stuff coming up that I didn't like eat, but my mother, she cooked a lot of things for us. So as I saw her raising us and being present, and I always wanted to make sure that I was present for my own kids. So I had my daughter, my oldest daughter, Jessica. I had her at 19 years old. And I felt as a young mother, I felt forced to be a mother. Did I regret it in that moment? No. Once I saw that beautiful little girl, that was all I needed to see. But I felt like I had to grow up faster than my peers, because now I had to put on the face of motherhood when I wasn't ready. But I learned, I got ready, and I took care of my daughter to the best of my ability, because even with some things like, say you're putting together a camera, those things come with instructions. Motherhood does not come with instructions. Those are things that you just have to either emulate or learn on your own. So I had good aunts and good people around me, older people. And for some reason, my mother was the same way. Most of her friends were older. So I emulated a lot of what I saw as far as being a mother and nurturing my kids and making sure they were clean and making sure they were fed. And I remember one time I worked at Subway. And Subway was close to the apartment that I lived in. And I had my little girl, we had a gray and pink stroller, and I put her in the stroller. I said, it's our Saturday. So we would walk from my apartment to the mall, because it wasn't far from where I lived. So that was our walk, that was our time. And I never forget, an older lady followed us around in Bells. And I kept thinking, like, what is she doing? What is she looking at? And that lady name was Miss Wesley. Miss Wesley came around, and because I always, on Saturdays, this was our thing. I had to go buy her some cute little outfits. So everything was pink. So Miss Wesley made her way around where we were, and she looked over, she said, is that your baby? And my defense mechanism came up, and I was like, yes, ma'am. How old are you? And I said, I'm 19. And she said, that's the cleanest baby I've ever seen. For you to be so young. And I took that as a compliment. So I took pride in making sure that my children were always clean and dressed nice and those type of things. So when I had my son, we would go over to my grandmother's house, to my granny, before she passed. And she would always say, do you ever let him get dirty? And I'm like, yeah, granny, he plays. And she was like, that little boy is the cleanest little boy I've ever seen. So I took pride in that as a mother, to make sure that my children were always fed. They never went to bed hungry. They were always clean. And I didn't have a lot, but I made sure that I had enough. If they had enough, then I was good with that. So motherhood has been an accomplishment for me. It really has been. I really, really love being a mother. It's nothing that I would take back from it.
So when you said that, I realized that at the time, compared to those who I saw around me, my mother had me at a young age then, although it was 20, which would be later these days.
Yeah.
And she still would go out with her friends. And for a moment, I would play on that. Because even though I was little, I told you, I'm only child, so that's who plays Monopoly or Scrabble or whatever with her cards. And so she might be getting ready to go out, and she getting ready to go out. I'm like, Mama, I don't want you to go out. And at first, that worked for a while. And she's like, well, I'm going to go out. So she'd go out here and there, and I was like, well, I don't want you to go out. And she'd be like, you're going to be all right. I'm going to go out tonight. And I would stay with my grandparents when she would go out. But I remember a few times she'd get dressed, and I'm looking at her, do I look nice? And I would say, Mama, you look beautiful, you look nice. And she'd get ready to go, and I wait, and then her friends would get there. I'm little, and I start crying. I said, I don't want you to go this other. That worked a few times. Yeah. It worked a few times. Until one time I did it, meaning a few times, about 3 times. One time I did it, she said, boy, you don't start crying until it's time for me to go. She said, I'm going to be back. And I understood. I just innately understood. She still needed some time out. She didn't do that regular.
Right. That's right.
And the majority of times, as I said, up until those moments, she would be with me besides work. And so when she did that time and she came home, she checked on me at my grandparents' house, I was like, I'm gonna stop doing that. I'm gonna stop doing that because I know that's wrong and you need to go out. So that was one particular aspect that I remember when you were saying having your children or your first at a young age. And then the other one, I remember one time our church would take these trips, and she was a Sunday school teacher. And so they would take these trips to Great America. And the first time it happened, I didn't really say anything. Meaning we go to Great America. I'm the same age as a lot of the children. She'd give me my money. I would leave and go do what I was going to do.
By yourself?
By myself. By myself. And she'd have about 6 or 7 kids. And so the second year that happened, I came back because we would meet back at the van or whatnot just to make sure all the kids were together. And I want to say back then, I don't know, I guess maybe I'm 12, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was something where I could go by myself. And so I pulled her to the side and I said, why are you going with all them kids all the time? I said, you need to go with me. I'm your son. And she was like, that's very selfish. And I said, how is that selfish? And I'm aware of people around and I'm whispering to her. And she said, when I give you money to go do what you want to do you know exactly what you want to do? I said, yep. And she said, tell me. I said, I want to go to arcade. I might ride a ride or two, but I want to go to arcade. So she says, you not only know what you want to do, I know where you're going to go and what you're going to do. She said, now some of these kids, if I'm not here, what are they going to do? And I said, well, they can go with other people. She said, well, you see that the other people have people. She says, you should be thankful. Okay. Yeah, you should be thankful. And I was like, well, really what it is, Mama, I said, you giving my money away. That's how I see it. I say, because you giving me money, but you giving my money to them. And once again, she just looked at me. And she was like, and I could tell she wanted to say something, but it's too many people around, and she was just like, we'll talk about that, but just, do you need some more money right now? I said, no. I said, because I had my amount, and I would proportion my amount. So that's another memory when she's young. So another time, as far as being young and a mother, I could also see that, I don't know about you, but I'm going to introduce this, the dating thing. Because my mother did not bring men around me. She did not bring men around me to the point where it is memorable who I was introduced to. And before I let you go, I'm going to say when I was 10, and she introduced me to my biological father. I had not met him. And we would take trips in the summertime. I'm saying before the age of 10, my mother could drive. And literally, when school was over for me, at some point, we're going to take a trip. Like we might go to Grand Canyon, we might go to Mesa Verde, we might go to Disneyland. But she's going to drive. And the only time she's going to pull over is if I have to go to the bathroom or something like that. And so she says, I'm going to take you to meet your father. You haven't met him. So we went to Los Angeles at 10 years old. So we go to LA. He's from Los Angeles. My mother went to Texas Southern. My dad, biological father, he went to Texas Southern. And my eventual stepfather all went to Texas Southern University in Houston, for which I eventually went to Texas Southern University. And so my dad was from LA. And when I met him, his grandmother at the time, this is in 1979, owned a whole apartment complex. And so every day I just go, I talk to him, and I go play. I go play, and this was during the summertime. And one time when I came in, he was sitting in the living room, she was sitting in the living room, and they just let me just rip and run throughout the summer. And she said, tomorrow morning, I'm leaving for Atlanta. She said, now, you can go with me, or you're more than welcome to stay with your dad. She says, I told you I thought you needed a relationship with him.
Wow.
And so I've also told you I don't like him. His personality cuts me the wrong way, and I have tried to endure because of you. And so that is over with. And so you can make a decision now, or you can make a decision tomorrow. And I'm standing there, and the first thought in my mind as a little boy, I'm like, man, it's crazy. Basically, he lets me do what I want to do. I can rip and run, and it's a big apartment complex. And just as quick as I had that thought, I was like, man, my mama made me. Even though she's young, I said, I can't let my mama go to Atlanta by herself. And so that's what struck me. You know, she was young, but she had a lot of decisions to make, and she had even made that decision, that conscious decision to try to get together or reconcile or whatnot with my dad, not for her sake, but for mine.
For yours.
And so I realized that, and I was like, Mom, I'm gonna go with you. And she's like, you're welcome. I'm not gonna be mad at you. We're still gonna be in relationship. And so I bring that up to say, were there any hard decisions you felt or you knew you had to make concerning your children that you were willing to sacrifice, and you had sacrificed, but you came to some places where, now I gotta do what's right for me, and because you're a part of me, we all going.
Right. I can say that I remember having my children. They were all 6 years apart, as if they came planned. But I remember different situations that I found myself in as a mother, choices for bad choices that I made coming up, and I could never ever picture myself without them. I could never ever leave them and go to pursue my dreams or my aspirations at the time, because I felt like, hey, I'm a mama now. I have kids. It's just not gonna work. But in other instances, I've seen where there's been a single mom who had to make those hard decisions. And I applaud them, because children do need their fathers. Sons do need their dads. So the girls were different than my son. Raising him was pretty easy. You know, he's a good boy. He's a good man, but he was a good boy. So I remember when the hardest decision that I remember making on his behalf was, he made it to 3rd grade. He was at Franklin Elementary in Port Arthur, Texas. His teacher was Mrs. Gillum and Ms. Villarreal. That was his 2 teachers. And he made it to 3rd grade, and there was a disconnect in his learning. And I kept trying to figure out what was going on with him. I didn't know. And there was nobody there to help me to figure out what was going on with him. You know, sometimes he'd get it, sometimes when it was just that he was really smart, but he was not getting the work, you know? So the hard decision was, okay, do I let him go on to 4th grade knowing he doesn't know? Or do I keep him in 3rd grade and let him get it? So that was a hard decision for me. And I sat him down, I talked to him, and Joshua always had these heroes. He always looked up to Michael Jordan. He always looked up to Kobe Bryant and different ones. That was his thing. So I sat him down and I said, you know, I talked to him about Michael Jordan not making the basketball team, and I talked to him about different ones who were famous that were held back, but look at them now, you know. And so we got over that rough patch. But I think it was more of a burden to me to see him have to repeat 3rd grade than it was for him. It became easy for him, you know. And so he got to high school, and by 10th grade, I was like, no, my son can't go to Memorial. It was for different reasons that I saw that he was not going to make it. You know, no, he's not gonna make it in this environment. So what I did, I took him out of Port Arthur Independent School District, and I would drive every day to Beaumont so that I can get him to school at Evolution Academy, where he graduated from. But I knew he needed a small environment. I knew he needed one-on-one more than he needed a 30 classroom full of people. So these were some hard decisions that I had to make on behalf of my son. Well, my girls got it. It was just funny that he needed more than they needed. But it was always a sacrifice that I had to make on his behalf. Now, don't get me wrong, it was sacrifices that I wanted to make for him because I wanted to see him to succeed. As a single mother, so that was for the question that you asked. Yes. Those were the hard decisions, some of them. Because yes. Trust me, it was much more yes. When you're talking about a single mom with 2 daughters and a son. So, but God gave me space. He gave me space. As if it was planned space, in between them. But ultimately, I can remember making a decision when I didn't have a car to get Jessica, my oldest, back and forth to school. So it was a school in our area, and most of the kids that went there were raised not like I reared my daughter, and I'm just being honest, I didn't want her to go to school with them. So I made a sacrifice. I would get up and walk past that school to get her to the school that I wanted her to go to. And I did that every morning. Some mornings I didn't even want her to walk. I would put her on my back and walk her to school because I did not want her going to this particular campus. Hold on.
I know this is a serious one. I had to pause the interview right there. This woman said she packed a child on her back. So I have to go back to my grandparents for stories like these. So I just want to make sure. Hold on. I need everybody to catch that. We have a modern woman. She put a child on her back to get him to school. Oh my goodness.
I did. It was Jessica.
Continue.
I would walk her to school on my back, and then I would get to school and kind of hang out. Oh, stop. I would get there and kind of hang out a little bit, and eventually I got a job. I started working there. So we would walk together, and before I got the job there, her teacher name was Miss Sarton. Miss Sarton volunteered to pick her up in the mornings. So you're talking about a black woman letting her child go with this white woman to school and home on a day-to-day basis. People looking at you like, no, you didn't. Anything could have happened to her. But I always prayed, if I didn't do anything, I always prayed and asked God to cover my children and protect them from hurt, harm, or danger. That was always a constant prayer, because I would always hear my grandmother and older people pray that particular prayer. But she started picking my daughter up, bringing her to school and bringing her home. And then eventually I got a job at the school. By the time she got to 5th grade, I was working there. So I eventually decided that this was right after Joshua was born. And I finally got a car. It was some years later, I got a car. And I was able to bring them to school. But I worked. I would get a job. Whatever school they went to, I got a job there, substituting. So I would work there and do hair. So I got my license to do hair. And I would pack my children, bring them to the shop with me. I would go to work at the school, go to the shop in the evenings. But my weekends were tied up in the beauty shop. That was my thing. To work and make sure I had money, to make sure they ate, make sure they provided. I provided for them because I can remember when I had Jessica and I had to go to the food stamp office. That's what it was called, the Texas Department of Human Services. And I sat in there, and my caseworker name was Miss Johnston. And Miss Johnston would always look at me because all the kids would be running around playing, and I was always a germaphobe. And I'm sitting there with my pretty little baby, and I'm like, she ain't getting down on that floor. You don't play in here. And she knew that. And so one particular moment I went to the back, and she looked at me, she said, you have got to want better. And I said, I do, Miss Johnson, I do want better. She said, what can you do? And I told her, I said, I do hair. I said, I like to do hair. And I went on and I got my cosmetology license, right after that. And she said, you're going to do good. You're going to do great things. I said, I know. I believe that I will. But in that moment, I started boo-hooing. I started crying because I hated going to that office. Absolutely hated. I said, Lord, if you please, get me a job where I never have to be on food stamps ever again. And that was in 2005. I got a job that paid me benefits. And I was able to take care of my babies and take care of myself, and I never saw food stamps again. Now, the flip side of that is I don't look down on anybody that's on food stamps. The choice is yours, as the choice was mine. But I knew that that's not what I wanted. So my children, my two oldest, my two babies, my son and my daughter, they never knew that part. Only Jessica. And she only knew what I would let her see. But as a mother, I can say this to the younger mother as well as the older mother. There were things that I knew that were contrary to my motherhood that they should have not seen. I heard you say that your mom didn't bring men in and out. Those were not, that was not my story. I dated openly. I didn't let men live with me until like later on in life. And I kept going, why do I keep finding myself in this cycle? You know, what's going on? Because if you could remember, like back in the day, they would say, they talk, boys do locker room talk. Mm-hmm. Well, men did the same. So they felt like, oh, she's easy. So I can go live with her. She's on Section 8. I don't have to pay no rent. I don't have to do this. So those are the things that growing up as a mother, like coming up as a mother in my 20s and my 30s, that I was like, no, this is a cycle. So something has to change. So it wasn't until later, I kid you not, when I had my daughter, Julia, she's 20 years old. So 20 years ago, the light went off. I was able to see things a little bit more clearer. But did I stumble on the way? Of course. I made some bad choices along the way as a mother, that things that I never even wanted them to know or see. And that's the one thing that you never want to make a mistake of, is allowing your children to know what you're doing, how you're doing it. They don't need to know, because all of those things come back. They come back, and they come back to bite you in the worst way. So I remember Jessica becoming a teenager, and it was the other part of motherhood life that I was living, going out, being, my mother at that time had moved in with us, so I had a little more freedom because she was there with the kids. And so I would go out and I would do my thing. And then here you are as a single mom, finding yourself in predicaments that you should not have been in. And my daughter went through my phone and found messages that I was having a conversation with this gentleman who she knew. And when she did that, oh man, that was the worst feeling ever. That was the worst feeling ever. And I don't mind being transparent about who I was versus who I am. So as a young mother growing up in those times and those situations, I found myself trying to be wanted, trying to be seen. And so I allowed myself to be put in different situations as a woman, as a mother, because I knew I wanted better, but I also wanted someone to see me. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
I wanted someone to see me, and not the part that you were told, but the part that was intimate, the more detailed Rashonda. So throughout my life of being a mother and becoming a woman, it is now that I have the freedom to look back on those days and see, Lord, you kept me through that, and that, and that, and that, and I can just go on and on. How he kept me through certain situations and circumstances where now I can look back and be like, thank you, Lord. So when I say thank you, Lord, those moments are very, very, I hold that thank you very, very dear to my heart, because he kept me. He kept me. He kept my children safe. He kept me from hurt, harm, and danger. All of that stuff that I asked him for, the promises that he's made to me throughout my life, he kept me. So, I really enjoy. I could talk about a whole bunch of different things, but I know we only have a little bit of time, so maybe you could come back and we could do part 2 to this. But I honestly enjoy being a mother.
Amen.
I really do.
Amen. I heard that. A request for part 2. Okay. Come
Yeah.
on.
So I really, really enjoy being a mother. I cherish the moments that we have, but I'm also a grandmother. I have 4 beautiful granddaughters. My oldest daughter has afforded me the privilege of being a Gigi. I love it. So my oldest, she's a teenager now. And I got little Kenya and Anaja and Kariana and Josiah. And that's a different kind of feeling there. That's a different kind of feeling. You know, them kids go on the back burner for the grandbabies. Period. Point blank. You'll get there one day. One day.
We'll have to bring you back to speak about the rest of motherhood and a little bit of grandmotherhood. But I thank you. I'm so proud that you were able to make time to share your experiences, and I thank you for the intimacy that you revealed. And I hope that this somehow helps, encourages, or maybe even in some ways corrects some mothers. So it was wonderful having you, and I know I already thanked you for your transparency, but it was a little weight in the room. I had some memories working, but the one takeaway, she carried the child on her back. It's still done like that. My gosh. Amen.
Yeah.
Any closing words? Or would you happen to have a question for me?
No.
I got so caught up in your story.
I know. I can't think of anything, but like I said, it's so much more. I'm 51 years old, and you're talking about over 30-something years of being a mother. So there's a lot that I could share in this moment, but I enjoy it to the utmost. I enjoy being a mom. I'm glad they're all growing. It's just one more thing that I wanted to share. It was hard being a mother and letting go, because you're talking about growing up with your kids in a sense. So it was hard letting go, but I had to allow them to grow, allow them to see who they could become, and they've done it. They've shocked me to the utmost. I really enjoy the fact that I can honestly say no one has been to jail. Thank you, Jesus. My son is 25 years old and he doesn't have any babies. You know, it's a lot that I'm just grateful for. You know, I did it wrong, but I made sure that they did it right. I didn't hold back. What I shared with Joshua, I shared with Julia. Everybody got the same story. And I made sure that they knew about everything. The things that nobody ever told me, I made sure my kids knew early about sex, drugs, alcohol, what it does to your body. I did it wrong, but I want you to do it right. So to young mothers that are listening or maybe listening today, I just want to share with you that it gets better. Hang in there. Just make sure that your life is not only pleasing to God, but make sure that everything you do, not like I did it, but everything you do, that your kids will be well pleased with you. And when they look back on life and the moments growing up in your house and under your leadership, your guidance, that you're doing it and it's pleasing to God, but make sure that it's also showing them the correct way to live.
Thank you again.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.